السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So I'm not quite sure if we need the microphone or not, but we'll try it. If not, we'll shut it off. So inshallah, we are continuing with the journey to the hereafter. And last thing we talked about, you guys who were here last week, where did we stop? So journey of the hereafter. Martyrs? What about them? So this is the hisab, right? The presentation of the deeds, the discussion Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has with His slaves on the hereafter. And so this is prior to receiving their books. Okay. Now we're at the stage where the individuals will be receiving their books. So after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had talked to the creation based on their level, whether they're Muslims or sinners or disbelievers, questioning them so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would allow them the chance to provide excuses for why they had done such and such, or whatever the case is. And so once this happens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows the books to be given and spread. So each one of them has his own book that has been written by the angels, documenting all the details of our lives, our talks, our actions, a complete record of all our entire life. And so this will be given to us, and we know that usually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He had mentioned in the Quran that there are two categories. Those who will receive their books with their right hand, and those who will receive their books with their left hand. And so those who receive their books with their right hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ فَسَوْفَ يُحَاسَبُ حِسَابًا يَسِيرًا وَيَنْقَلِبُ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. And so those who will receive the books with the right hand, they will be judged an easy account. So this is not the detailed account. Remember we said whomever is going to be questioned will be punished. You remember that? We talked about the questioning before. Guys who were here last week, we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would talk to themselves. Those who will be questioned in details, they will be punished. Others, they will be having an easy account, which means they will be presented with their deeds. Why did you do such and such? And they will be forgiven. The Muslims, they will be shielded, not being exposed, and so forth. So they would, they would receive their books in their right hand. So that's the hisab yasir. And then once they see their books, actually out of their happiness, they would, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this in the Quran, it's beautiful. When they see it, they say, Ha umaqra'u kitabiyya. They'll yell, hey, look, read my book, read my book. Ha umaqra'u kitabiyya. Inni dhamantu anni mulaqin hisabiyya. I thought that, I was certain that I would be meeting my account. فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. Then he will be in a pleasant life, فِي جَنَّةٍ عَالِيَةٍ, in an elevated Jannah. So those are the people who will be receiving their books with the right hand. Now when the others receive their books with the left hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described it as they would receive it behind their backs. Now would you have a choice of receiving your book with your right or your left? Do you have a choice? No, you have no control. Right? You will, like your hand that has been chosen to receive your book with will be elevated, and you're going to take it in your hand. And so the ones with the left hand will be behind their back as a form of a bit more disgrace. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and so those are generally the disbelievers and perhaps maybe the hypocrites. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ وَرَاءَ ظَهْرِ. So whomever gets his book behind his back, he will also call out, but he's going to call فَيَدْعُو ثُبُورًا. Right? So فَيَدْعُو ثُبُورًا, which means that he will cry out for destruction. Like وَثُبُورًا is a form of Arabic language to when calamity happens, you say, I'm destroyed, I'm destroyed. You're going to call for destruction. And so وَيَدْعُو ثُبُورًا وَيَصْلَى سَعِيرًا. And another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِشِمَالِهِ فَيَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي لَمْ أُوتَ كِتَابِيَهِ. He says, I wish I did not receive my book. يَا لَيْتَهَا وَلَمْ أَدْرِ مَا حِسَابِيَهِ. And I did not know what my and not know what my account was. يَا لَيْتَهَا كَانَتْ الْقَاضِيَةِ. I wish that the death that I had was the end of it. Because now he's going to see other things that he's been told about, but however he had refused to believe in them. Now, once this happens, when we receive our books, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us accountable or shows us everything else, next is the station of the scales. But what's the difference? What's the point? Previously we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made us accountable, had discussed things with us, asked us questions, why you did that and why not. Then what's the point of the scale? Sorry?
The way you put it.
Okay. The point of the scale is because your reward or punishment will be based on that scale. Right? Now, before that, many of the authors talk about, it's called اقتصاص المظالم, right? Which means, اقتصاص, how should I translate قصاص? Retribution, right? Retribution between transgressions that happened. So usually they discuss that. Because remember we talked about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would talk to each one of us, what did you, would not do. Obviously there are things that have happened between the creation. Somebody might have wronged somebody else. So where does this happen? And so sometimes they talk about it now and sometimes they can talk about it later on. However, I'm just going to mention it now and then we're going to talk about the place where it happens. And this is very important because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, this is the day of complete justice. The day where everything will be judgment will be past complaint. If somebody owes you something, he will repay it on that day. If you owe somebody something, you will repay it on that day. If you ever had transgressions happen to you, you will take your right from that person. If you transgressed on somebody else, he will take his right from you on that day of judgment. And so the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned, he said, لَتُؤَدَّنَّ الْحُقُوقِ إِلَى أَهْلِهَا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ حَتَّى يُقَادُ لِلشَّاءِ الْجَلْحَاءِ مِنَ الشَّاءِ الْقَرْنَاءِ. So the Prophet ﷺ said that the rights will be fulfilled on the day of judgment to its rightful owners. Even the sheep will take its right from the ram that has rammed it. So some sheep don't have horns, a ram has horns. And so quite often sometimes there'll be a dispute between, have you ever seen sheep? Sometimes they kind of argue, I guess. Rams. The Prophet ﷺ said, the one that has been unjustly hit, its right will be taken. Okay, so to that point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fulfill this. Now on the day of judgment, how if we're talking about the qisas, retribution, how will this happen? So the Prophet ﷺ is really encouraging us to settle things in this world. So he said, مَنْ كَانَتْ لَهُ مَظْلَمَ لِأَخِيهِ مِنْ عِرْضِهِ أَوْ شَيْءٍ فَلْيَتَحَلَّلْ مِنْهُ فِي الدُّنْيا. So whomever has a transgression upon his fellow brother, in his honor or anything else, then let him absolve it, resolve it today, before the day of judgment, when there is no dinar or dirham, when there's no silver coins or gold coins. إِن كَانَ لَهُ عَمَلْ صَالِحٌ أُخِذَ مِنْهُ بِقَدْرِ مَظْلَمَتِهِ. If that person had good deeds, then it will be taken from him with the amount of that wronging that he had done to the other person. وَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ حَسَنَاتٍ. And if he does not have any deeds, then it will be taken from the other person's sins and given to him. So this is the individual that the Prophet ﷺ asked his companions on the day of judgment. He asked them, who is the person who is broke? We all know this hadith, right? Who's the broke person from my ummah? And they answered, the one who doesn't have any worldly things, right? La dirham wa la mata', any worldly things. And so the Prophet ﷺ corrected the understanding. He said, no, for my ummah, the person who truly is broke is when he comes on the day of judgment with salatin wa siyamin wa sadaqah, right? Wa zakah. He had prayed and he had fasted and he's given zakah. So obviously this person is a Muslim. However, what this person had done is that he had cursed this individual, and maybe he had had mentioned, wrongfully mentioned or wrongly mentioned something about their honor, right? Accused them of, for example, doing illicit interactions with opposite genders or all these things. Or he might have wrongfully taken a person's wealth, stolen from him, or cheated him in something, or shed the blood of somebody, or hit somebody. So on the day of judgment, the Prophet ﷺ said, this will take from his hasanat, this person will take from his hasanat, and this will take from hasanat. If he did not fulfill the rights of others at that point, and all his hasanat are gone, then he's broke at that point. So what's going to happen is that they will take from their sins and be placed on him, and he will take him to the hellfire. Now what's important is you understand that we're talking over here about believers, Muslims. We're not talking about the non-Muslims. We're talking about the Muslims themselves. This is what we're talking about. And so the Prophet ﷺ had also mentioned, he said, transgressions are darkness on the day of judgment. So we need to, if there's any injustice or any wrong that we've done, we need to clear it up in this world before the hereafter. Even when you have right, and you did not fulfill it, on the day of judgment, that person is going to take from your hasanat. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man mata alayhi dinarun and dirham," whomever dies and he owes a dinar or a dirham, then it will be given from his hasanat. Qudiya, which means it will be paid from his hasanat. Laysa thamma dinar wa dirham. On the Day of Judgment, there is no such thing as dinar or dirham. So this is we're talking about, settling things on the Day of Judgment. Now, what about individuals, for example, if somebody that did something and you reciprocated it? What happens then? You took your right, okay? So it's balanced. Now, if you had reciprocated in less than what the person had done to you, then he owes you hasanat. However, if you reciprocated a bit more than what he had done, then you owe him hasanat. So you have to be careful. This is something that is important. When somebody does something to you, if you want to reciprocate it, make sure you reciprocate it exactly equal or less. Because anything more, now you are the transgressor. And you owe him hasanat in the Day of Judgment. So we have to be careful. Which causes that, cause for us to, whenever we fall into, and whenever we get angry, we have to be careful how we reciprocate things. Yes?
Somebody does this against you and you forgive him,
Then you get rewarded, inshallah. You will be rewarded. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive your sins. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive your sins on the Day of Judgment. Allah. Alright, now quite often when we talk about these things, remember I'm just going to remind us again, what is the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala judges us for in muhasabah? First thing we're asked about is prayers. Good. Now one of the also first things that will be settled on the Day of Judgment, one of the first things that will be settled on the Day of Judgment are things that have to do with blood, life taken. Right? Any sort of transgression on a person's life taken unjustly without justified cause, I'm talking about Islamically justified cause, then that will be paid on the Day of Judgment. Now some would ask, well, wait a second, I thought we said that we will judge for the prayers first. Over here this hadith says that the first thing that will be settled is aspects that have to do with bloodshed. So how do we reconcile this? Because the Prophet said, أَوْ مَا يُقْضَى فِيهِ الدِّمَاء. The first thing that will be settled and the Day of Judgment ruled in are things that have to do with blood. But the other hadith, so how do we reconcile this? Now that is true. So there are two separate things. These are things that have to do with the rights of Allah and the rights of the creation. So that will be settled is our prayers. The rights of the creation, the first thing that will be settled is aspects of bloodshed. Okay. Now here's a question. Remember we said that the sheep and the ram, transgressions between them will be settled. What's the point of that? Are they even liable? Are they legally liable? No. But why? So why would Allah want to do that? Exactly, to signify, right? To show the complete justice on the Day of Judgment. Yes. So remember, we said that the ram that has horns that wrongfully attacked or hit the hornless one, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would settle it between them. He will take the right of this one from the other one. Why? What's the point? If they're not even legally liable, they're not going to go into Jannah. There's nothing going on. So why is this happening? It's to show the complete justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now once this has been settled with them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell them, Kunu turaba, be dust, and they will be dust. This is when the disbeliever on the Day of Judgment wishes that he was also dust. يوم يقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا, right? I wish I was like this. Nothing will happen to me. I would just become dust and pass away. Alright, so when the mizan comes out on the Day of Judgment, when we're talking about the mizan, which is the scale, it is actually a real scale. Okay. Sister, can you hear me at the back, or should I use the microphone? We're good? Okay, because I'm being bothered by the microphone over here. It's annoying me. Okay, so on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He brings out the scale, it is a real scale. Okay, we're talking about scale, which means it has two arms, it weighs, and also in Arabic it says that it has a lisan. So lisan means what? It means tongue, right? So how can a scale have a tongue? What is this referring to? No. In Arabic, lisan al-mizan is that thing that sticks out that tells you the where is it equal or not. Okay? The old time, like the old scales, there's actually a piece of metal that sticks out of it, and the arms that sticks out and tells you if things are balanced or not. So this is when they say it has a lisan. I'm saying this because I did, there are people that literally translate it as a tongue. They think tongue, right? But it's not. Lisan can refer to anything that's sticking out. Is that clear? Anything that sticks out, that's there, an object that is there. So the Prophet ﷺ said, and mentioning about this, and we said that the scale is to specifically measure exactly, right, where things are going to happen. Because you remember in Jannah there are elevations, and in Jahannam there are, also levels, and so based on that scale your judgment will be passed. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, يُوضَعُ الْمِيزَانُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَلَوْ وُزِنَ فِيهِ السَّمَوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ لَوَسَعَتْ. The scale will be placed on the Day of Judgment, will be brought forth. يُوضَعُ will be established. If the heavens and the earth will be placed in them to weigh them, they will fit in there. So this tells you the size of the scale. And so at that time the angels, I'm continuing the hadith, the angels would say, يَا رَبْ لِمَنْ يُزَنْ هَذَا. Who is the scale for? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whomever I will from my creation. And then the angel will say, Subhanaka ma abnaka haqqa ibadatak, right? Subhanaka, which means far away you are, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from all defects or from all things that are negative. We did not worship you as befitting as you should be worshipped, because of the understanding of what's going to happen at that time. And so that scale on the Day of Judgment is extremely accurate. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said in the Quran, He said, وَنَضَعَ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. We establish the scale with justice on Day of Judgment. فَلَا تُظْلَمُ نَفْسٌ شَيْئًا. That no soul will be treated unjustly. وَإِن كَانَ مِثْقَالَ حَبَّةٍ مِّنْ خَرْدَلٍ أَتَيْنَا بِهَا. And even if it's a weight of a mustard seed. The mustard seed, does it weigh anything very much? No, right? So this is just to kind of bring close the weight of things, the scales, that even that much will be brought forth and will be weighed. So it's complete justice on the Day of Judgment. So the other question is, what's going to be weighed? Our deeds, right? So our books. Is that right? Anything else? Do you know that the scholars actually had 3 opinions? I should say 4, but we can say 4 opinions, right? So they had 3 opinions of what's going to be weighed. One of them is that your deeds themselves will be weighed. Your deeds themselves, they'll have a physical form and they'll be weighed. And the reason they have that opinion is from the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ said, كلمتان حبيبتان على الرحمن خفيفتان على اللسان ثقيلتان في الميزان. He said 2 words that are beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but heavy on scale on the Day of Judgment, and that is Subhanallah bihamdih, Subhanallah azim. So from there they took that actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would will give them physical form, and your actual deeds will be weighed. Your prayers will be weighed. Your speeches will be prayed. Your dhikr will be prayed. All this will be weighed on the Day of Judgment. Even to the point that the Prophet ﷺ said, there's nothing that will be placed on the Day of Judgment more weighty in your scale, more weighty than husn al-khuluq, right? Good manners. So manners are behaviors. So how are they going to be weighed? Allah A'lam, but it seems they'll be made into physical form and they'll be weighed. So that's one opinion. The second opinion is that it's the person himself that'll be weighed. Who's going to be weighed? The person, you yourself, you're going to place on the scale. And so how weighty it is dependent on your level of piety, level of iman, your deeds. So that's going to become. And the reason they have that opinion, and so by the way, like how actually physically heavy you are makes no difference. Okay? Because the Prophet ﷺ, this is like a couple of beautiful hadiths. The Prophet ﷺ said that he will be brought forth the person who is samin, which means big, right? I don't want to say obese because some people refer samin as obese, but huge person, weighty, heavy in weight on the day of judgment, and he would not weigh the weight of the wings of a bug. And then he recited sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, فَلَا نُقِيمُ لَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَزْنًا. On the day of judgment will not establish a weight for them. In another hadith, just to clarify this, have to signify that this is also true, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, an incident had mentioned something about Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So Abdullah ibn Mas'ud one time was climbing a tree to get some arak, miswak for the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the wind blew his garment, and they saw how really scrawny, not skinny, scrawny even, his feet were, right? His legs were. They're almost like twigs. And so when the Sahaba saw that, they just kind of laughed. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he told them, he said, مِمَّا تَضْحَكُونَ, right? What are you laughing, right? Are you laughing from how scrawny his legs are? And so the Prophet ﷺ said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِي, my soul is in his hand, so he's swearing by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are heavier in weight, in mizan, in scale, than Uhud. So this is referring, the scholars took that actually the physical person will be weight. So that's how many opinions? 2. Now the third opinion is that was mentioned, is that it's actually your book will be weight. Okay, your book of scales of deeds will be weight. Where do they get this opinion from? The sister that gave that opinion. No pressure. Yes, hadith. So be more specific. Do you guys know the person on the Day of Judgment will be brought forth that has 99 sijil and then 1 card of La ilaha illallah? Al-bitaqa, right? The card. So, okay. So the Prophet ﷺ had said in a hadith that a person from my ummah will be brought forth. يُخْلَصُ رَجُلٌ مِّنْ أُمَّتِي, على رؤوس الخلائق, in front of all creation. And so 99 sijil, which means almost files, right, will be spread in front of him, each one the extent of his vision, right, mad al-basar. And so he'll be telling him, do you deny this? Do you deny any of this? Right? Did my scribes, the angels, the scribe, did they wrongfully say anything? Did they wrongfully, they're going to do anything? And so he will say, La ya Rab, no my Lord. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell him, do you have an excuse? And he will say, no my Lord, I do not have an excuse. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he'll tell him, yes you do. There is a hasana that is remaining for you. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يُظْلَمُ الْيَوْمِ لَا ظُلْمَ الْيَوْمِ. There is no injustice, there is no injustice or injustice today. And so a card will be brought out, written in it, أَشْهَدُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدٌ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. And so it will be said, bring forth your waznak, your scale. And so he will say, my Lord, what is this card going to do with all these sijillat, all these documentations, 99 of them? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, you will not be, no injustice will be done to you today. And so all these, documentations of wrongdoings will be put on one side, and that one card will be placed on the other side, and what we'll do, it will be heavier, bring the other side completely up, showing that, how heavy it is because of the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this is where they get the opinion that is actually your book of deeds that will be weighed. And so that being said, the fourth opinion comes here. And so some of the scholars say that there is no contradiction, that perhaps all these are weighed, right? The person, his books, his deeds, all this will be taken into account, right? And so this is what's going to be weighed on the Day of Judgment. Now, that being said, we do know that there are some deeds that can help increase the weight on your Day of Judgment, your scale. Yes. You had a question? You're going to ask about those deeds? Alhamdulillah. So there's some hadith we mentioned. We're not going to mention all of them, but just going to mention a couple of them. So, for example, the Prophet ﷺ said that, we mentioned this hadith, right? أَثْقَلُ شَيْءٍ, the heaviest thing that can be placed on your scale on the Day of Judgment is حُسْنُ الْخُلُقِ. Right? Good manners and etiquettes. We cannot stress how much, as Muslims, we have to bring this out. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was sent so that I would complete, utamim, right? Complete makarim al-akhlaq, the most noble of manners, right? The most noble of manners and etiquette. Some people think that this is just with the human interaction. No, this talks about also your manners and etiquettes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a Muslim that has complete manners and etiquette is a person who gives Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala his right in worship, who gives the human creations their rights in worship. He does the best in everything. There's excellence in all his actions. And so this has to do with husn al-khuluq. The other one we also mentioned is subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanallah al-azim, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet said they are heavy on scale. The other hadith, and we took this in the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, when the Prophet said, at-tahuru satur al-iman, that tahur, which means, we described it in detail, but I'm going to describe it just as translated, purification. Purity is half of iman. Walhamdulillah tabla al-mizan, right? Saying alhamdulillah fills your scale. So these things can increase your acts of deeds on Day of Judgment. Now, since we mentioned fasting, fasting has a virtue on its own. And this has to do with one of the explanations or interpretations of one of the hadith that was mentioned. And it goes along the line is that كل عمل ابن آدم كفارة إلا الصيام, right? Every action of human being is every good deed, every good deed you perform, referring to every deed means to every good deed they perform, is a kafara, is an expiation, except fasting. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. It is for me and I will reward for it. So over here, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, Ibn Rajab rahimahullah, when he was talking specifically creation, and it can that things that are remaining, either you owe somebody, or you transgressed on their rights, or you wronged them, your hasanat will be a source of expiation, which means they will be taken from your hasanat. Okay? Except for fasting, it will be protected. Okay? So this will be still in your scale. The other interpretation of it is that on the Day of Judgment, when our scales are being weighed, each sayyi'ah, right, will be cancelled by a hasana. Right? The cancellations, Siyam will not be included in that equation. So the hasanat from Siyam will not be cancelled, be left and protected. We talked about fasting. So this is something that Ibn Rajab had mentioned pertaining understanding of this hadith, talking about the virtue of fasting on the Day of Judgment. All right, now after the scale happens, once our actions are scaled, now remember, we're just to remind ourselves what had happened, right? This is after standing for the judgment for 50,000 years, right? The heart facing on the Day of Judgment. Whether some of the Muslims face it, some are disobedient, and we're talking about some of the believers, they'll be shaded underneath the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're not going to feel the hardships, but then, because of 50,000 years, some of the hardships that we'll be asking the messengers to intercede on our behalf. Once the Prophet ﷺ intercedes, judgment will we received our books, and then our scales are being weighed. Then comes the hawd, right? Hawd, which means what? Can be roughly translated as a basin. What's a basin? Well, not a container. A reservoir, right? A reservoir of water, fluids. Okay. Now the Prophet ﷺ said, on each Day of Judgment, each prophet will have a hawd. Each prophet in hawd, and people will be, like, you know, the nations of each prophet will be towards it. Now, the largest of these reservoirs belong to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be given to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They will be the largest of basins or reservoirs from among all the prophets. Like, you know, in fact, its water is being fed from the river in Jannah. The river is Al-Kawthar. Good. And the Prophet said, "Lahum mizaban." Mizaban. How do I translate mizab? Have you guys seen the Kaaba? There's something protruding out from the corners somewhere, like it's sticking out, so that when rain falls, it kind of pours, comes out from it. That's a mizab. So what's that called? It's like rain spout. It's called rain spout? Okay. They have it in all buildings. Anything that's a flat building, because you don't want water to accumulate, they have these things so they can get the water out. So that's called, like, you know, sorry?
The gutters.
No, the gutters that we have are lined and then they come down, so they're not gutters. Right? They're just kind of pieces of things sticking out. Fluid can come out from it. There's two of them, one made out of silver, one made out of gold, that's pouring into the hawd of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, yes, there is a difference of opinion between the scholars of the position or where this hawd will be. So some scholars say it's after the sirat, and some scholars say it is before the sirat. The reason behind the difference is because of the hadith itself, or well, well, opinion. So the Prophet ﷺ, let's take the hadith of Prophet ﷺ. He mentioned about the hadith. So there's multiple, by the way, like, you know, there's tawatur for this hadith regarding the hawd, and in fact more than 50 hawd of the Prophet ﷺ. So one of the hadith the Prophet ﷺ said, "Hawdi masirat shahr," right? It takes a walking distance of a month to cover the length of the hawd. He said, "Wazawayah sawa," and its edges are equal. It's not rectangular. And Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, "Ma'uhu abyad min al-laban." It's water, it's fluid, it's whiter than milk. وَرِيحُهُ أَطْيَبْ مِنَ الْمِسْكِ, and its fragrance is more beautiful than musk. وَكِيزَانُهُ كَنُجُومِ السَّمَاءِ, right? وَمَنْ يَشْرَبْ مِنْهُ فَلَا يَظْمَأْ أَبَدًا. So وَكِيزَانُهُ cups, right? كَنُجُومِ السَّمَاءِ, they're bright as the stars of the heavens that we see. Whomever drinks from it will never be thirsty again. And another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he had mentioned, he said, like, you know, when people are coming forth, and so the Prophet ﷺ is looking for his ummah, and so the companions asked him, "Would you know us? Would you know who we are?" So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Na'am," right? "Lakum sima," you'll have a alama, sima, which means alama, right? A sign on you. And so he said, "Laysat li ahad min al-ummam," a sign, like, you know, a sign no other nation has, and that is, you come to me, like, you know, the white spot on your foreheads and on your lips because of the wudu, right? So this is our sign, and the Prophet will know us by this. The another narration, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Tura fi abariq al-dhahab," right? There are cups of silver in it, كعدد النجوم, as the number of stars in the heavens. أشد بياضا من اللبن وأحلى من العسل. Another narration, the Prophet ﷺ said, "It's sweeter than honey." So this is the basin that is referring to what's going to happen. Now, why did some of the scholars say that this is before Sirat? It is because the narration, the Prophet ﷺ, when he's talking about the Sirat, he said, "Some ahead of you, you to it, for you." And so the Prophet ﷺ said, "Some away from it. It might be even thrown in the hellfire." And so this is why they said it must be before after the Sirat. Some scholars say it is after, but I'm just giving you a different opinion. Wallahu a'lam, maybe the more correct one in the Sirat. to use this for a bit, inshallah. So they're saying the hardships of the Day of Judgment. Some people are thirsty. We're looking for thirst and so on, so that we would, not be thirsty. But also because the hadith, he said, when whoever drinks from it will be thirsty again. Well, what about the sinners that go into the hellfire? So that's the point that they kind of mentioned. Why this is not after the sirat? Because if you cross the sirat, there's a chance that you most likely might go into Jannah. Allahu Alam. But there's there's counter responses to all these claims. But many of the scholars say it is before the Salat. Yes? No, they will run to it. After the scales, we're going to talk about the disbelievers, what's going to happen to them. So the Prophet ﷺ said, أنا فرضتكم على الحوض ولا يعرفن ولا يرفعن إلي رجال منكم حتى إذا أهويت إليهم لأنالهم اختلجوا دوني فأقول أي رب أصحابي فيقال إنك لا تدري ما أحدثوا بعدك. So the Prophet ﷺ said that I am ahead of you at the hawd, at the basin, at the reservoir, and men of you or people from you will be risen to me or brought to me حتى إذا أهويت إليهم, so that I'll be kind of going towards them, they'll be quickly snatched away from me. Allah protect us, so that would not be among those people. And so the Prophet ﷺ would say, oh my Lord, my companions, my friends. And so it will be told to them, you do not know what they have أحدثوا بعدك, which means it can be translated as what they have done after you. So the scholars, they interpreted this, and so another narration of the Prophet ﷺ would say, سُحْقًا لِمَنْ بَدَّلَ بَعْدِي. سُحْقًا over here, which means destruction, or they would be put far away. Because suhq, which means bu'd, right? Which means be distant. So be distant away or destroyed, whomever has أحدث بعدي, right? بدل بعدي, which means changed after me. So the scholars had mentioned that this actually has two interpretations. One is that those individuals, let me read what Imam al-Qurtubi had mentioned, just to kind of give you all details. So he said, our scholars said that whomever had apostated from the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or had innovated in it what does not please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it was not permitted by Allah to do so, then he is from among those that will be rejected from the reservoir, from the hawd, that will be pushed far away from it. And the ones that would be pushed the furthest are those who khalafu, which means they differed, or they khalafu, which means, well, they differed from jama'at al-muslimin, right, from the group of Muslims, وَفَارَقَ سَبِيلَهُمْ, and deviated from their path. And then he mentioned some of the people who are considered innovators, such as al-Khawarij. So the Khawarij were at the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, and they actually fought with the Sahaba. One of their opinions, or one of the ideologies they had, is that a person who commits a major sin, then he becomes a disbeliever. So this is some of the ideology that they have. So this is an innovation in religion. And it said, and then he also mentioned the Rawafid. Rawafid are those, specifically a specific sect from the Shias are multiple. And also he mentioned the Mu'tazila. So all these have deviated from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. They were rejected from the hawd. So although some of them might be considered as Muslims overall, but they invaded in the religion. So they have that opinion. They said either they apostated, or they had changed in the religion what Allah did not permit. So innovations in religion. So that's why we have to be careful about innovating things in religion. Yes? Imam al-Qurtubi. Imam al-Qurtubi. Which is a long time ago. By the way, so of those had started at the time of the Sahaba, by the way. So they started at the time of the Sahaba. So they've been there for a while. And so the Imam al-Qurtubi, I'm just going to mention also, he said, included in those, الظلماء المسرفون في الجور, right? The transgressors who excessively transgressed and excessively wronged, and who have concealed the truth, and maybe have killed individuals, and including in those people who openly show their major sins, talk about the major sins, openly practice major sins. And so he said that the bu'd, the being pushed away, there's hal duna yakunu fi hal, right? Maybe might be for some time and then it may be brought back to the basin. And so he's saying those are like, would happen after the maghfirah. And he said, in kanat tabdil fil a'mal, if the tabdil was in forms of actions. So innovations in religions can either have to do with actions or in beliefs. In beliefs is more dangerous. Innovations in actions is less dangerous. It is dangerous, but less. So those maybe after a while, after they're forgiven, they'll be brought back to the reservoir, to the hawd, to drink from it. All right, now afterwards, generally once this happens, so after the mizan, after the, like some people will be drinking from the hawd, there's what's called the hashr, which is the grouping, okay? So people will be grouped. Each ummah will be asked to follow who it worships. So we group together. So it's حشر دار القرار الجنة والنار. So it says يطلب من كل أمة أن تتبع الإله الذي كانت تعبده, which means each ummah will be asked to follow whatever it used to worship. So they'll be gathered together. And so I'm going to mention a hadith just quickly, but I'm going to explain it a bit more. So this is narrated by Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim. Abu Hurairah had Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he said that the Prophet ﷺ had responded to a question when the companions had asked the Prophet ﷺ, they asked, are we going to see our Lord on the Day of Judgment? Are we going to see our Lord on the Day of Judgment? So the Prophet ﷺ said, هل تضرون في القمر ليلة البدر ليس دونه سحاب? Are you unable, or are you prevented from seeing the moon on a full moon on a night where there is no clouds? So they said, no, O Messenger of Allah. And so he said, you'll be able to see your Lord on the Day of Judgment like that. So this is the part of the hadith we're talking about. So the Prophet ﷺ said, يجمع الله الناس, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would gather the people. فَيَقُولُ مَنْ كَانَ يَعْبُدُ شَيْئًا فَلْيَتْبَعُهُ. Whomever used to worship something, then let him follow it. فَيَتْبَعُ مَنْ كَانَ يَعْبُدُ الشَّمْسِ وَيَتْبَعُ مَنْ كَانَ يَعْبُدُ الْقَمَرَ وَيَتْبَعُ مَنْ كَانَ يَعْبُدُ الطَّوَاغِيتِ. And so those who would worship the moon would follow the moon. Those who worship the sun would follow the sun. And those who would worship tawaghit, which are the transgressors, the kings that tell people to worship me, right? The shayateen that are being worshipped. So they would follow them. They will follow them where? To the hellfire, right? They will follow them to the hellfire. Including, by the way, the people of the book. So the Yahud will say, we used to worship Uzair, right? Ibn Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you lied, I did not have a son. And so they will follow that to the hellfire, right? And also, some of the Christians, when we ask, who did you worship? They say, your son, right? Isa ibn Maryam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you lied, I did not have a son. And so they would follow it to the hellfire. And so in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, فَلَا يَبْقَى, right? So only people remaining behind, وَتَبْقَى الْأُمَّةِ فِيهَا مُنَافِقُوهَا, right? This ummah will remain, and in it is the munafiqeen, the people who are hypocrites. فَيَأْتِيهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي غَيْرِ الصُّورِ الَّتِي يَعْرِفُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come to them in a way that they do not recognize. And so He will tell them, فَيَقُولْ أَنَا رَبُّكُمْ. He will say, we are your Lord. He will say, I'm your Lord. And they will say, أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ, right? Because they do not recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at this point, in a form that they do not recognize, in a way they do not recognize, and they will say, أعوذ بالله منك, we do not know who you are, هذا مكاننا حتى يأتينا ربنا. This will stay here until our Lord comes. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come to them in a way that they recognize Him. And so they will say, أنت ربنا, right? And they will say, you are our Lord. And so they will follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then this is when the sirat will be placed on top of Jahannam. So this is when the sirat will be on top of Jahannam. And nobody can reach side to Jannah until they cross the sirat over Jahannam. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, the first who goes across, فَأَكُونُ أَوَّلْ مَنْ يُجِيزُ, I'll be the first one to go across on the other side. وَدُعَاءُ الرُّسُلِ يَوْمَئِذٍ. Now by the way, all nations will follow that Now it's not just the nation of the Prophet ﷺ that will be waiting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also the Muslims from the other nations, the true Muslims from the other nations. The first nation to cross the bridge are the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ will be crossing, and the dua of all the messengers on that day will be Allahumma sallim, sallim. Oh Allah, give us safety, safety. And then the Prophet ﷺ would further go describe what is the sirat on that day of judgment. Do we have time? What time is it? 2:30. Do you want to just talk about quickly the sirat or just keep it next time? What do you guys want? Huh? Next time? We're doing the second. We have a halqa fiqh. Okay, we'll stop. Sirat. And then we might start into, I don't know, I actually want to take all of Jahannam together. So you might just talk, we'll see. We'll play it by ear, inshallah. All right? جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.